A 70-year-old millionaire spends his birthday completely alone in a square, while his 3 adult children travel the world spending his money on credit cards. When a 6-year-old beggar girl approaches and discovers it's his birthday, she's shocked. How can you spend your birthday alone? The next day, she appears with a small birthday cake, having spent her last coins, the money she needed to eat. Touched by the child's generosity, the millionaire makes a decision that changes everything. He blocks all his children's cards. What happens when they find out is devastating. The golden leaves danced lazily through the crisp afternoon air, creating a crunchy carpet under the feet of the few passers-by still lingering in the Central Park. Arthur Ashworth adjusted his cashmere overcoat and sighed deeply, watching the vapor of his breath mix with the cold November air. At 70, this elegant man of impeccable posture carried on his shoulders the weight of a business empire built over 4 decades. But his eyes revealed a melancholy that all the money in the world couldn't hide. Sitting alone on a wrought-iron bench, Arthur watched the families playing around the small green. Fathers pushed children on swings while mothers arranged impromptu picnics on colorful blankets. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the space, creating a symphony of happiness that only intensified the loneliness growing in his chest like a wound that would never heal. His phone remained silent in the inner pocket of his jacket. No calls from his children, no affectionate messages, just the deafening void of relationships that had become business transactions disguised as family ties. Edward, 45 there, was on some paradise beach in Thailand. Marina, 42, was touring the casinos of Monte Carlo. Robert, the youngest at 38, had left for a ski season in the Swiss Alps, all generously funded by him. All absent when their presence truly mattered. The scent of dry leaves mingled with the distant smell of roasted chestnuts, creating a nostalgic atmosphere that transported Arthur to memories of when his children were small. He vaguely remembered afternoons like this one, but even then, his physical presence had rarely coincided with his emotional one. There was always an urgent meeting, a deal to close, an empire to expand. That's when she appeared. A small girl, no older than 6, timidly approached the bench where Arthur sat. Her bare feet made an almost imperceptible rustle on the dry leaves, and her patched clothes contrasted sharply with the elegance of her surroundings. Messy brown hair framed a dirty little face, but her eyes shone with a pure and innocent curiosity Arthur hadn't seen in decades. "Excuse me, mister," she said in a sweet but hesitant voice, stopping a few feet away. Do you have kids?" The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. He lifted his eyes from the ground and met the child's sincere gaze, feeling a lump form in his throat. For a moment, he considered lying, making up some excuse to avoid the conversation, but something in the purity of that look stopped him from running from the truth. "I have 3, he answered, his voice as controlled as he could manage. "But they're traveling." The girl tilted her head, processing the information with the peculiar seriousness of children. "Traveling where?" "To faraway places," Arthur sighed. "Very faraway places." "And you're not going to go play too?" The seemingly simple question carried a devastating weight. Arthur felt the words get stuck in his throat, unable to explain to a 6-year-old the complexity of family relationships that had deteriorated over the years. How could he explain that his children saw him only as an inexhaustible source of financial resources? How could he tell her that their trips were paid for by him, but his company was never wanted or even considered? "No," he finally replied, his voice almost a whisper, "I'm not going to play." The girl frowned, clearly disturbed by the answer. She took another step closer, her childish curiosity overcoming any initial shyness. "Why not? Are you sad?" Arthur felt tears welling in his eyes. No one had asked if he was sad in years. His employees treated him with professional deference. His partners discussed only business, and his children, well, His children simply didn't ask. "Tomorrow is my birthday," he said, not knowing why he was sharing this information with a stranger. "I'm turning 70. The girl's eyes widened. 70 years. Wow. Are you going to have a party? Arthur shook his head, feeling the weight of loneliness crush his chest. "I'll probably spend it alone." The expression of pure shock on the child's face was devastating. "Alone on your birthday?" The girl's voice trembled with genuine indignation. "But that can't happen. Nobody should be alone on their birthday." Arthur watched, fascinated, as this child, who clearly had almost nothing in life, showed more concern for his well-being than his own children. She came even closer, and he could see small tears forming in the corners of her brown eyes. "What's your name?" Arthur asked, feeling a genuine curiosity for the first time in months. "Sophia," she replied, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her torn sweater. "And you?" "Arthur Ashworth." Sophia repeated the name slowly, as if committing it to memory. "Mr. Arthur, tomorrow I'm going to do something very special for you. I promise." Before Arthur could ask what she planned to do, Sophia ran off, her bare feet rustling over the dry leaves as she disappeared among the park's trees. Arthur was alone again, but something had changed inside him. For the first time in years, someone had shown genuine concern for his happiness. That night, in his 15-room mansion, Arthur dined alone at the mahogany table that could easily seat 20. The silence was broken only by the discreet clinking of silverware against fine china and the careful footsteps of Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper who had cared for the house for over 2 decades. "Mr. Ashworth," she said timidly, serving the second course. "Did the children call today?" Arthur shook his head, pretending to be absorbed in a financial report. Mrs. Gable sighed softly, knowing all too well the family dynamic of that house. She had witnessed the growth of Arthur's 3 children, seen how the father's emotional absence had been compensated with expensive gifts and unlimited financial freedom. "Maybe tomorrow," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Maybe," Arthur agreed, but they both knew it was just a vain hope. Later, in his private study, Arthur sat before the imposing oak desk, where he made decisions that moved millions of dollars daily. He opened the bottom drawer and took out an old photo album, its pages yellowed with time. The first photos showed a seemingly happy family, him, young and ambitious, his late wife Helena smiling radiantly, and 3 small children playing in the garden of the first house they bought. When Helena died 12 years ago from a fast-spreading cancer, Arthur plunged even deeper into his work. The children, already adults at the time, seemed to have inherited only his sense of financial opportunity, but none of his work ethic. Gradually, the visits became sporadic, the calls rarer, and the requests for money more frequent and substantial. Arthur closed the album and walked to the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the city. The lights twinkled like terrestrial stars, and he wondered how many people down there were also alone. How many had also traded genuine relationships for financial convenience? His cell phone rang, and for a moment his heart leaped. Was it one of his children, remembering his birthday? But the name on the screen was his accountant's, probably with some question about tax reports. Arthur let the call go to voicemail. The next morning, Arthur woke with a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly hope, but something close to it. He remembered Sophia's promise and felt almost ridiculous for allowing the words of a street child to influence his mood. But there was something in the girl's sincerity that had touched a part of his soul he thought had been dead for years. He dressed meticulously, as always, but this time he chose a navy blue tie that Helena always said brought out his eyes. He had coffee alone, checked his emails twice, took 3 work calls, but his cell phone remained silent regarding personal calls. By 10 in the morning, he could no longer concentrate on anything. He decided to walk to the park, telling himself it was just for some fresh air, but knowing he was actually hoping to find Sophia again. The park was nearly empty at that hour, A few people hurried past, some mothers pushed strollers, but there was no sign of the girl. Arthur sat on the same bench as the day before and waited, feeling foolish but unable to leave. That's when he saw her appear between the trees, walking carefully and carrying something in her hands. As she got closer, Arthur could see she was carrying a small cake, clearly homemade and simple, with a single white candle stuck in the middle. "Mr. Arthur," she shouted, running the last few feet, "I told you I was going to do something special." Arthur felt his throat tighten. "Sophia, where did you get this?" She approached, beaming with joy. "I made it. Well, actually, Mrs. Carmen helped me. She has a tiny little bakery and she let me use her oven." But something in her expression changed, and Arthur realized there was more to the story behind the simple cake. Sophia carefully placed the small cake on the bench next to Arthur, her little hands trembling slightly. The cake was simple but made with evident love, a yellowed batter, uneven sugar icing, and that single candle dancing in the morning breeze. "Sophia," Arthur said softly, "tell me how you managed to make this cake." The girl looked down, biting her lower lip. I asked Mrs. Carmen to help me. She's really nice, you know. She always gives me a roll when I'm really hungry." Arthur felt a pang in his chest. "And she didn't charge you anything?" No, Sophia shook her head energetically. "I paid for the ingredients. She just let me use the oven and helped me mix everything right." "What money did you pay with, Sophia?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Sophia fidgeted nervously with her bare feet, kicking small pebbles on the ground. When she finally looked up, Arthur saw tears shining in her eyes. "I had some change," she murmured. "I saved it up all week. People sometimes give it to me when I ask on the street." Arthur felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "Sophia, that money was for you to eat, wasn't it?" She shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant, but her voice betrayed her emotion. "But today is your birthday, Mr. Arthur. It's more important for you to be happy than for me to eat today." The girl's words echoed in Arthur's heart like thunder. A 6-year-old child, who probably didn't know when her next meal would be, had sacrificed her only source of sustenance to buy ingredients for a birthday cake for a complete stranger. The absurd, pure generosity of the gesture left him speechless. "Now you make a wish and blow out the candle," Sophia said, trying to hide her own emotion with enthusiasm. "My mom always said that birthday wishes are the most powerful of all." "Your mom?" Arthur asked gently. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "She died when I was really little. I barely remember her, but I remember her voice singing 'Happy Birthday' to me." Arthur closed his eyes, feeling tears threaten to roll down his cheeks. Here was a girl who had lost her mother, who lived on the streets, who regularly went hungry, and yet found the strength to worry about the loneliness of an old stranger. "Sophia, I want you to sing 'Happy Birthday' to me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The girl's eyes lit up. "Really? You really want me to?" Arthur nodded, unable to speak. Sophia wiped her hands on her sweater and took a deep breath. In a sweet but trembling voice, she began to sing, "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mr. Arthur. Happy birthday to you." As he listened to that childish voice, Arthur felt something inside him break and rebuild at the same time. Tears rolled freely down his face, but for the first time in years, they were not tears of pure sadness. They were tears of a complex emotion that mixed pain, gratitude, and a kind of love he had forgotten existed. When Sophia finished singing, she clapped her hands happily. "Now make a wish and blow." Arthur looked at the flickering candle, then at the girl's expectant face. He closed his eyes and made a silent wish, not for money, not for success, but for a second chance to understand what truly mattered in life. He blew out the candle, and Sophia squealed with joy. "Now let's eat the cake," she said, breaking the small pastry with her hands and offering half to Arthur. "Sophia, this cake is yours," Arthur said. "You spent your money on it." "No, Mr. Arthur. I made it for you. And besides," She smiled mischievously. "My belly is used to being empty. Yours isn't." Arthur took the piece of cake she offered, but before eating, he asked a question that would change everything. "Sophia, where are your parents? Where do you live?" The girl was quiet for a moment, chewing slowly. "My dad. He worked for a big company, but he got laid off. After that, he got really sad and started drinking. One day he left and never came back." "And where do you stay now?" "On the street, mostly. Sometimes I sleep at the church when it's really cold, or at the shelter when there's a bed. But the street is freer, you know. Nobody bosses me around." Arthur felt a physical pain in his chest. "How old are you, Sophia?" 6. "I'll be 7 in December." 6 years old. The same age Edward was when Arthur bought him his first expensive toy, trying to compensate for an absence he didn't even realize he was creating. The difference was stark and devastating. "Sophia, I want to ask you an important question," Arthur said, choosing his words carefully. Would you like to have a real family?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she tried to smile. "Everybody wants that, Mr. Arthur. But some people like me don't get to choose those things." It was in that moment that Arthur made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Arthur looked deep into Sophia's eyes, seeing a purity there that he had forgotten existed in the world. The girl was finishing her piece of cake, licking her fingers with childish satisfaction, completely oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions churning in the heart of the man beside her. "Sophia," he said finally, "I want you to come with me. I'm going to take you home, give you a hot bath, real food, and we'll talk about your future." The girl stopped licking her fingers and looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion that broke Arthur's heart. It was clear she had learned, in her few years of life, that offers that were too generous usually came with hidden costs. "Why?" she asked with the brutal honesty of a child. "You don't know me. Why do you want to help me?" Arthur took a deep breath. "Because you gave me the most precious gift I've ever received in my life, Sophia. You reminded me what it means to be human." During the drive to his mansion, Sophia was quiet, watching the city through the car window. Arthur instructed his driver, Frank, to drive slowly, allowing the girl to absorb the magnitude of the change happening in her life. When they reached the gates of the estate, Sophia let out a gasp of admiration. "You live here? Alone?" "Alone," Arthur confirmed, feeling the weight of the irony. "In 15 empty rooms." Mrs. Gable nearly dropped the silver tray when Arthur walked through the front door, holding Sophia's hand. Her experienced eyes immediately understood the situation, and she knelt down to the girl's level. "Hello, dear. What's your name?" "Sophia," the girl replied shyly. "I'm sorry if I'm dirty. I live on the street." "You don't need to be sorry for anything, Angel," Mrs. Gable said, casting an approving glance at Arthur. "We'll get you all cleaned up and fed. When was the last time you had a real meal?" Sophia thought for a moment. "I don't remember. It's been a few days." Arthur clenched his fists, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. While his own children wasted thousands of dollars in expensive restaurants around the world, an innocent child went days without eating. After a long bath and a hearty meal, Sophia was unrecognizable, dressed in clean clothes that Mrs. Gable had managed to borrow from a neighbor. Her brown hair shone clean, and her eyes seemed even more expressive. She sat on the sofa in the main living room, clearly intimidated by the grandeur of the space. "Mr. Arthur," she said quietly, "I don't belong here. It's too beautiful, but I'm just a girl from the street." Arthur sat beside her, careful not to startle her. "Sophia, have you ever heard of adoption?" The girl's eyes widened. "Adoption? Like when a family chooses a kid to be their daughter?" "Exactly. I would like to adopt you, Sophia. I would like you to be my daughter." Sophia was silent for several minutes, processing the information. Arthur respected her time, understanding that for a child who had lived through abandonment and uncertainty, offers of stability could be frightening. "But you already have kids," she said finally. "3 of them. Won't they be angry if you adopt me?" The question struck Arthur like an arrow. "My children are adults, Sophia. They have their own lives, and besides, a family can have as many children as it wants, right?" "It can," she agreed slowly. "But what if they don't like me?" Arthur took Sophia's small hands in his. "If they don't like you, that's their problem, not yours, because you are a special, brave and kind girl. Anyone should feel lucky to have you as family." That afternoon, Arthur made the most drastic decision of his life. He called his personal lawyer and began the legal proceedings for adoption. He also instructed his accountant to prepare a radical change to his will. Sophia would be included as a rightful heir, with equal rights to his biological children. But there was an even more dramatic decision Arthur needed to make. While Sophia played in the garden with a set of dolls Mrs. Gable had quickly bought, he locked himself in his study and did something he knew would change everything. He blocked all of Edward's, Marina's, and Robert's credit cards. Within minutes, his phone began to ring. First Edward, then Marina, then Robert, all desperate, all furious, all demanding to know what had happened to their cards. Arthur let every call go to voicemail, a bitter smile playing on his lips. For 20 years, he had financially supported his children without question. Houses, cars, trips, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, all paid for by him, all given without limit or condition. And in return, he had received sporadic visits and self-serving calls. Now, for the first time, he wanted to see if there was any genuine love behind that financial dependency. He wanted to know if his children were capable of showing concern that wasn't related to money. When Sophia came in from the garden, she found Arthur sitting in his favorite armchair, looking at the mountains of unread messages on his phone. "Mr. Arthur, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Dear, did your kids call to wish you a happy birthday today?" Arthur felt a lump in his throat. "No, they didn't." Sophia climbed onto his lap without asking permission, a gesture of intimacy he hadn't experienced in decades. "You know what I think." "What do you think?" "I think sometimes God lets you lose some people so you can find more special ones." Arthur hugged Sophia tighter, knowing that this 6-year-old girl had just spoken one of the greatest truths he had ever heard. Outside, the phone continued to ring incessantly. The next morning, Arthur was awakened by the insistent ringing of the doorbell. It was only 7 o'clock, but someone was ringing with desperate urgency. He went downstairs, still in his robe, to find Mrs. Gable already on her way to the door with a worried expression. "That must be important to wake the whole house at this hour," she murmured. When Arthur opened the door, he was met by Edward, his eldest son, visibly agitated. His blonde hair was disheveled. There were deep, dark circles under his blue eyes, and his expensive clothes were wrinkled as if he had traveled all night. "Dad, we need to talk. Now." Arthur maintained his composure, though he felt his heart race. "Edward, what a surprise. I thought you were in Thailand." "I was, until my card was declined at the hotel yesterday. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I had to borrow money to pay the bill and buy a ticket back." "Come in," Arthur said coldly. "We'll talk in the living room." Edward stormed through the door, his eyes quickly scanning the room as if looking for signs of change. That's when he saw Sophia coming down the stairs, still in her pajamas, her freshly washed hair shining in the morning light. "Who is this child?" Edward demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "This is Sophia," Arthur replied calmly. "My adopted daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Edward stood frozen, processing the information, his face cycling through a range of expressions: surprise, confusion, and finally, pure rage. "Adopted daughter, Dad. Have you completely lost your mind?" Sophia, sensing the tension in the air, hid behind Arthur, her small hands tightly gripping the hem of his robe. Arthur placed a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. Edward, watch your tone. There's a child present. A child you decided to adopt without consulting anyone in the family. Dad, you're 70 years old. What is this madness? Arthur led Sophia to Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, could you get Sophia some breakfast? Edward and I need to speak privately. Once they were alone, Edward exploded. Dad, you can't be serious. Adopting a street kid. Do you know what kind of trouble that could bring? What kind of background does this girl have? And what a coincidence she shows up just when you decide to block our cards. What a coincidence indeed, Arthur said, his voice like ice. A 6-year-old girl hatching a master plan to infiltrate our family with a birthday cake. Don't be sarcastic with me. You know very well there are gangs that use children to run scams. And even if that's not the case, Dad, think about your age. You don't have the energy to raise a child. Arthur walked to the window, watching Sophia play in the garden with a stuffed puppy Mrs. Gable had given her. The sight of that little girl running freely on the lawn, laughing for the first time since he'd met her, filled his heart with a joy he hadn't felt in decades. Edward, in 70 years, Sophia is the only person who has shown genuine concern for me. She spent the last coins she had to make me a birthday cake. When was the last time you did anything for me that didn't involve asking for money? Edward turned red. How can you compare? We're your children. We have rights. Rights? Arthur turned to face his son. For what rights? The right to completely ignore me, except when you need money. The right to spend my birthday traveling on my dime while I sit here alone. Dad, we didn't know you wanted us here. You never asked. I shouldn't have to ask, Edward. I shouldn't have to beg for the attention of my own children. Edward took a deep breath, clearly trying to control his anger. Dad, let's be practical. You want attention? We can give you more attention. You want us to visit more? We'll visit, but this adoption thing is ridiculous. Cancel it now, unblock our cards, and we can forget this conversation ever happened. Arthur felt a deep pain in his chest. Even in a crisis, Edward could only think in transactional terms. And if I say no, Dad, you're being irrational. Marina and Robert are on their way here too. The three of us are going to have a serious talk with you. If necessary, we will question your mental capacity to make financial decisions. The threat hung in the air like a poison. Arthur looked at the son he had raised, fed, educated and supported for 45 years, and saw a stranger driven only by greed. Are you threatening me, Edward? I'm protecting our family's interests. Dad, be reasonable. You have 3 legitimate children. You don't need another one, especially some troubled kid you just met yesterday. Just then, Sophia appeared at the living room door, her eyes wide and frightened. Mr. Arthur, I don't want to cause trouble. I can go back to the street if it's better. Arthur felt something inside him shatter at those words. A 6-year-old child offering to give up the first real chance at happiness she'd ever had, just to avoid conflict in a family that wasn't even hers. Edward looked at Sophia with disdain. See? She understands the situation better than you do. Dad. Arthur knelt down to Sophia's level, taking her small hands. Sophia, you are not going anywhere. This is your home now, and no one— He looked directly at Edward. Absolutely no one is going to take you from here. Dad, you're making a mistake you're going to regret, Edward said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling Marina and Robert. The 3 of us will handle this. As Edward left the room, Sophia looked up at Arthur with tears in her eyes. He hates me, doesn't he? Arthur hugged the girl, feeling his own anger swell like never before. No, sweetheart, he doesn't hate you. He's afraid of you. Afraid of me? Why? Because you showed me what real love is. And that scares people who only know transactional love. 2 hours later, Marina and Robert arrived together, straight from the airport. Marina, elegant even after a red-eye from Monte Carlo, swept into the house as if she owned it, her high heels echoing on the marble of the foyer. Robert, younger but equally arrogant, followed closely, both radiating the same contained indignation Edward had shown. Arthur watched from his study window as his three children gathered in the garden, gesturing animatedly and occasionally glancing toward the house. Sophia was in the library, paging through a book of fairy tales Mrs. Gable had found, completely oblivious to the hurricane forming around her. "Mr. Ashworth," Mrs. Gable said, entering the study discreetly. "They're asking to speak with you in the main living room, all three of them together." Arthur took a deep breath. "Very well, Mrs. Gable. It's time to face the storm." When he entered the living room, he found his three children positioned strategically. Edward stood behind the main sofa, Marina sat elegantly in a leather armchair, and Robert paced nervously back and forth. The arrangement looked more like a corporate board meeting than a family gathering. "Dad," Marina began in her soft but calculated voice, "we need to discuss this delicate situation." "Delicate situation," Arthur repeated, keeping his tone neutral. "Are you referring to my decision to adopt Sophia?" "Dad, let's be direct," Robert interrupted, stopping his pacing. "You're going through a difficult time. It's understandable. At 70, loneliness can lead to impulsive decisions." Arthur sat in his favorite armchair, the same one Sophia had climbed into the night before. "Impulsive decisions, an interesting choice of words." Marina leaned forward, adopting a more maternal tone. "Daddy, we're worried about you. Maybe you need more companionship, more attention. We can arrange that. We can hire a professional companion, someone trained to care for people your age." "Someone trained," Arthur muttered. "As if I were a pet." Edward stepped forward, his patience clearly exhausted. "Dad, enough with the drama. The situation is simple. You met a street kid yesterday and decided to adopt her. This is obviously an emotional and irrational decision. Cancel the process, unblock our cards, and we can discuss more appropriate ways for you to handle your loneliness." "And if I refuse?" The three children exchanged a look. A silent communication Arthur recognized immediately. They had rehearsed this. Marina spoke again, her voice now firmer. "Dad, you're showing clear signs of compromised judgment, impulsive financial decisions, forming inappropriate attachments to strangers, social isolation." "Social isolation," Arthur almost laughed. "The three of you have spent the last 5 years completely ignoring me." "We have our own lives," Robert said defensively, "but that doesn't mean we don't care." "Really, when was the last time any of you visited me without asking for money? When was the last time you called just to see how I was?" An awkward silence filled the room. Edward finally broke it. "Dad, we're not going to stand here and argue about the past. The fact is, you're about to make a mistake that will harm the entire family. Is this child going to inherit part of our inheritance?" The question cut through the air like a razor. Arthur looked at his three children, his children, and saw only greed in their eyes. "Our inheritance," he repeated slowly. "Interesting how you refer to my money as our inheritance." Marina blushed. "That's not what we meant." "It's exactly what you meant." Arthur stood, his voice gaining strength. "You're here because a 6-year-old girl represents a threat to your future financial plans." Robert exploded. "Dad, you're being ridiculous. Of course we're concerned about the inheritance. We're your legitimate children. We worked in the company. We helped build the family empire." "Worked?" Arthur laughed bitterly. "Robert, you were fired from the company 2 years ago for incompetence. Marina, you've never worked a day in your life. And Edward, you only held executive positions because you're my son, not because of merit." The tension in the room was palpable. The three children looked at each other again, and Arthur could see they were getting to their real purpose. "Dad," Edward said coldly, "if you don't cancel this adoption and restore our financial access, we will be forced to take legal action to protect our interests." "What kind of action?" Marina took a deep breath. "We will question your mental capacity to make financial decisions. 3 renowned psychiatrists have already agreed to evaluate your mental state. We have evidence of erratic behavior, impulsive decisions, possible manipulation by a third party." Arthur felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "You're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent." "We're trying to protect you," Robert said, but his voice sounded false, even to his own ears. Just then, Sophia appeared at the door, holding her book of fairy tales. She looked at the three furious adults and then at Arthur, her large eyes filled with concern. "Mr. Arthur, is everything okay? You're all yelling." The girl's presence instantly changed the room's dynamic. Edward, Marina, and Robert looked at her with a mixture of irritation and cold calculation. "Sophia," Arthur said softly, "go back to the library, sweetheart. Daddy has to finish some things here." But before Sophia could leave, Marina spoke. "Actually, I think she should stay. After all, she's what this is all about." An alarm went off in Arthur's mind. "Marina, Sophia." Marina addressed the girl with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do you understand that you're causing a lot of trouble for this family?" Sophia looked down, clutching the book to her chest. "And I don't want to cause trouble." "Of course you don't," Edward said sarcastically. "What street kid wouldn't want to live in a mansion?" Arthur stood up abruptly. "Enough! Get out of my house. Now!" But his children didn't move. Robert took a step forward, his voice heavy with a threat. "Dad, you have a simple choice. Your real family, or a child you've known for 2 days." Robert's ultimatum hung in the air like a death sentence. Arthur looked at Sophia, who stood in the doorway with silent tears rolling down her cheeks, and then at the 3 children he had raised and loved unconditionally. The choice they presented him was cruel and calculated. "A real family?" Arthur repeated slowly, his voice thick with a deep pain. "You think you're my real family? We are your biological children," Marina said coldly. "That can't be changed by some sentimental whim." Arthur walked over to Sophia and knelt beside her, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Sophia, honey, can you go to your room? I need to finish this conversation." Sophia nodded and whispered, "Mr. Arthur, if it's better for everyone, I can leave. I don't want your family to be destroyed because of me." The child's absurd generosity, even in the midst of her own pain, struck Arthur like a bolt of lightning. He hugged her tightly and whispered in her ear, "You are not going anywhere. I promise." After Sophia left, Arthur stood and faced his 3 children with an expression they had never seen before, a mixture of profound disappointment and iron resolve. "Real family," he murmured. "You want to know about a real family? I'll tell you about a real family." Arthur walked to his desk and pulled out a folder he had prepared the night before. "Edward, do you remember Carl Peterson?" Edward frowned. "The accountant who worked with us. The one you guys fired." "You guys fired," Arthur corrected. "I was on a business trip. When I got back, I discovered the 3 of you had fired 15 loyal employees, including Carl." Marina shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Dad, those were necessary cuts to increase efficiency." "Carl had been with the company for 40 years, Arthur continued, ignoring the interruption. 40 years of absolute dedication. When you fired him, you claimed he was embezzling funds. That was a lie, wasn't it? Tense silence filled the room. "Dad, where are you going with this?" Robert asked impatiently. Arthur opened the folder and pulled out a birth certificate. "Sophia Peterson, daughter of Carl Peterson and Maria Peterson." The blood drained from Edward's face. "No, it can't be. Carl couldn't find another job after you spread rumors about his integrity. He started drinking, lost his home, lost his family. Maria died of heartbreak and despair. Carl disappeared, leaving Sophia alone in the world." Marina stood up abruptly. "Dad, even if this is true..." "True," Arthur exploded. "You destroyed an entire family to save one salary. You created an orphan. And now that orphan, without knowing who I was, spent her last coins to make me a birthday cake." Robert tried to maintain his composure. "Dad, you're being dramatic. Business decisions are tough." But nothing," Arthur shouted. "You didn't stop there. I found more things last night." He pulled more documents from the folder. "Remember the Hope Foundation? The one I created to help children in need." The three children glanced at each other nervously. "I discovered you diverted 80% of the donations to personal accounts. Children went hungry while you funded your luxury trips with money meant for charity." Marina turned pale. "Dad, we can explain. And the nursing home I sponsored? That money also ended up in your accounts. Dozens of elderly people were moved to substandard facilities because you stole the funds meant for their care." Edward tried one last defense. "Dad, you're exaggerating. Those were resource reallocations." "Reallocations?" Arthur roared. "You stole money from orphaned children and abandoned seniors. You turned my generosity into your personal income source." He stepped toward Edward, his eyes blazing with rage. "And do you know what's most ironic? The child whose family you destroyed now shows more love for me than the three of you combined." Robert tried to regain control. "Dad, even if we made mistakes in the past, we're still your family. This girl is a stranger." "A stranger?" Arthur laughed bitterly. "Sophia has known me for 2 days and has already shown more genuine concern for me than you have in 5 years. She sacrificed her only meal to bring me joy. When was the last time any of you sacrificed anything for me?" Marina tried one last emotional appeal. "Daddy, we made mistakes, but we can change. We can be better. Can you? Or are you only saying that because I cut off the money?" Embarrassing silence. Arthur took a deep breath. His decision made. "Get out of my house now." "Dad, you can't be serious," Edward said desperately. "I have never been more serious in my life. You have 5 minutes to get off my property." Robert exploded. "Dad, you'll regret this. We'll go to the courts. We'll prove you're being manipulated." Arthur walked to the door and opened it. "Do whatever you want, but do it far away from here." Marina walked past him, whispering venomously, "That child will destroy you, Dad. And when she does, don't come crawling back to us." Edward stopped at the door, his last card on the table. "Dad, if you continue with this madness, you will lose your 3 children forever." Arthur looked him straight in the eye. "Edward, I lost the 3 of you a long time ago. I was just in denial." After his children left, Arthur found Sophia sitting on the stairs, having clearly overheard part of the argument. She ran to him, hugging him around the waist. "I'm Mr. Arthur. I'm so sorry. I didn't know my dad worked for you." Arthur knelt and hugged the girl, feeling tears roll down his own cheeks. "Sophia, it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. Are they really going to try to take you away from me?" Arthur looked into the eyes of the child who had become more important to him than his own biological children. "They can try, sweetheart, but I will fight for you with all my strength. And what if they win?" Arthur held Sophia's small face in his hands. "Then we'll face it together, because we are a real family now." Outside, the sound of departing cars echoed in the morning. But Arthur knew this wouldn't be the last time he saw his biological children. The war was just beginning. In the days that followed the confrontation, Arthur tried to create a normal routine for Sophia. He enrolled her in a nearby private school, bought her proper clothes, toys, books, everything a 6-year-old would need to start a new life. But beneath the apparent normalcy, he knew a storm was brewing. The first signs came through his lawyer, Alan Ramsey, who called on a rainy Thursday morning. "Arthur, I need to see you urgently. There are developments you need to know about." An hour later, Mr. Ramsey was sitting in Arthur's living room, holding a stack of legal documents with a grave expression. "Your children have hired Sterling, Price and Associates. It's the best family law firm in the city, Arthur. They aren't messing around." Arthur poured coffee for them both, his hands trembling slightly. "What exactly are they alleging?" "Progressive mental incapacity, undue influence from a third party, irrational financial decisions." Mr. Ramsey paused. "Arthur, they have 3 psychiatrists willing to attest that you are showing signs of senile dementia. Psychiatrists who haven't even examined me. Psychiatrists who have analyzed your recent behavior based on reports from your children. The sudden adoption, The social isolation, the impulsive financial decisions. Arthur laughed bitterly. Social isolation. They ignored me for years, and now they're using it against me. There's more, Arthur. They're alleging that Sophia is part of a larger scheme to take advantage of your vulnerable mental state. A scheme? A 6-year-old child? Mr. Ramsey hesitated. They've hired a private investigator. They're trying to find evidence that Sophia was planted to manipulate you. Arthur felt anger rise in his chest. What kind of people do this to an innocent child? Desperate people, Arthur. And your children are very desperate. Meanwhile, Sophia began to show signs of the stress she was under. Though Arthur tried to shield her from the details, she was smart enough to sense that something was wrong. She started having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night screaming that bad men wanted to take her away. "Mr. Arthur," she said one morning, nervously pushing food around on her plate, "I heard Mrs. Gable on the phone. She sounded worried." Arthur sat beside her. "Worried about what?" "Sweetheart, about men who want to prove you're sick so they can take me away from you." Arthur closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. How could he explain to a child that people could be so cruel? "Sophia, are you scared?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't want to go back to the street, Mr. Arthur. I feel safe here." Arthur hugged her tight. "You are not going back to the street. I promise." But the promises became harder to keep as the attacks intensified. In the second week after the confrontation, Arthur discovered his children had spread rumors throughout the business community. Old business partners began to look at him with pity and suspicion. Some even called concerned about his mental condition. The hardest blow came when Dr. Frank Miller, the family doctor for 20 years, showed up at his house. "Arthur, I need to talk to you." As a friend, they sat in the study, and Dr. Miller put on his most serious medical expression. "Your children reached out to me. They're worried about changes in your behavior." Arthur felt his blood boil. What changes? Impulsive decisions, forming inappropriate attachments, possible manipulation by a third party. "Frank, you've known me for 20 years. Do I seem mentally incompetent to you?" Dr. Miller hesitated. "Arthur, the truth is, adopting a child at 70, especially a street child you just met, is what, insane? It's unusual, and your children have a right to be concerned." Arthur stood and walked to the window. "Frank, when was the last time my children showed any concern for me?" "Arthur, answer me. When?" Dr. Miller was silent. "They're only concerned now because I cut off their money. Sophia showed more genuine love for me in 2 days than they have in 5 years. But Arthur, you need to see their perspective. A strange child appears and is suddenly being adopted." Arthur turned, his eyes blazing with anger. "Sophia is not a stranger, Frank. She's the daughter of Carl Peterson, a loyal employee my children destroyed. It's ironic that the child they orphaned now shows more humanity than they do." Dr. Miller looked shocked. "Carl Peterson? But yes, the girl who is supposedly manipulating me is a victim of my own children's cruelty." After the doctor left, Arthur sat in his armchair, feeling the weight of his years for the first time. He was fighting his own children, public opinion, a system that saw his decision as eccentric at best. Sophia appeared at the door, holding a drawing she had made at school. "Mr. Arthur, I made this for you." The drawing showed 2 figures, one large and one small, holding hands in front of a house. Above it, she had written in crooked letters, "My family." Arthur felt tears burn his eyes. "It's beautiful, Sophia." "Mr. Arthur, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, sweetheart. If your children manage to take me away, will you forget about me?" Arthur took the girl in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. "Sophia, even if the whole world tries to tear us apart, I will never forget you. You taught me how to truly love again." But as he spoke, Arthur could hear the phone ringing in the study. More trouble, more pressure, more attempts to destroy the only pure and true thing he had found in decades. The war was far from over, and Arthur began to wonder if he would be strong enough to protect Sophia from his own children. Arthur woke on a grey Friday with a bad feeling. He had dreamed of Helena, his late wife, whispering warnings he couldn't remember upon waking. He went downstairs for breakfast with Sophia, as had become their routine, but found Mrs. Gable standing in the kitchen with a panicked expression. "Mr. Ashworth, Sophia isn't in her room." The world stopped. Arthur ran upstairs, checking the girl's room, the bathrooms, every room in the house. Her clothes were all there, her toys untouched, but she had simply vanished. "Mrs. Gable, did you see anyone strange lurking around the property?" "No, sir. But yesterday afternoon, when I was taking Sophia to school, I noticed a black car following us. I thought it was just me being paranoid." Arthur's blood ran cold. He immediately called Mr. Ramsey, who arrived in less than an hour with a private investigator. "Arthur, we need to act fast," the lawyer said. "If your children are involved in this—" "Of course they're involved," Arthur exploded. "Who else would have a reason to make Sophia disappear?" The investigator, a middle-aged man named Marcus Thorne, asked detailed questions about Sophia's routine, possible threats, and the recent behavior of Arthur's children. "Mr. Ashworth, legally your children can't just kidnap the child, but they may have used other means." "What means?" "Psychological pressure, intimidation, even bribing local authorities. If they can prove Sophia is in a risk situation with you—" Arthur couldn't bear to hear the rest. He left the house and drove directly to the hotel where he knew Edward was staying. He stormed into the lobby like a hurricane, ignoring the concierge's protests. "Where is Sophia?" he yelled when Edward opened the hotel room door. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Sophia's missing. Where is she?" Edward put on a mask of false concern. "Dad, that's terrible. A missing child. Have you called the police?" Arthur studied his son's face, searching for a tell. Edward had always been a good liar, a skill Arthur now realized had been cultivated since childhood. "Edward, if you've hurt Sophia—" "Dad, how can you accuse me of something like that? I'm your son." "You are my son, but that doesn't mean I trust you." Arthur visited Marina and Robert, receiving the same vehement denials and offers of help to find Sophia. But there was something in Marina's eyes, a glint of barely concealed satisfaction that confirmed his suspicions. It was 3 days of hell. Arthur barely slept, barely ate, spending hours walking through the park where he met Sophia, hoping she would magically reappear. The police were called, but with no evidence of a crime, they treated it as a typical runaway case. "Mr. Ashworth," the detective said, "kids from the street have a habit of running off. She probably went back to the places she knew." "She didn't run off," Arthur shouted. "Someone took her." But without proof, his words sounded like the paranoia of an old man. On the 4th morning, Marcus Thorne called with devastating news. "Arthur, I found out what happened. Your children hired private social workers. They alleged that Sophia was being held against her vauntade by a mentally unstable man." "That's absurd." "Yes, but they presented evidence, forged medical reports, testimony from concerned neighbors. They managed to get a temporary order to remove Sophia from your custody." Arthur felt his legs grow weak. "Where is she?" "In a temporary state shelter." "Arthur, she's terrified. They told her you're sick and can no longer take care of her." Arthur drove immediately to the shelter, a grey, depressing building on the outskirts of the city. When he was finally cleared to see Sophia, he found her sitting alone in a corner, hugging an old teddy bear. "Sophia!" She looked up at him and started to run, but stopped abruptly when a social worker intervened. "Mr. Ashworth, you have only 15 minutes. And you must maintain physical distance from the minor." "Physical distance? She's my daughter. According to our records, there are questions regarding your custodial fitness." Arthur knelt 2 meters away from Sophia, tears rolling down his face. "Sweetheart, how are you?" Sophia was visibly traumatized. "Mr. Arthur, they said you're sick. They said it's dangerous for me to be with you." "Sophia, look at me. I'm not sick. I would never hurt you." But they said, "It doesn't matter what they said. You know my heart, Sophia. You know that I love you." The little girl began to cry. "Mr. Arthur, I want to go home. It's scary here. The other kids are mean. And I sleep in a room with 10 girls. There's one who pulls my hair at night." Pure rage coursed through Arthur's veins. His own children had put Sophia, a child who had suffered abandonment her whole life, into a traumatic situation once again. "Sophia, I'm going to get you out of here. I promise." "Time's up," the social worker said coldly. "Mr. Arthur," Sophia screamed as he was forced to back away. "Don't leave me, please." The sound of her desperate voice echoed down the hallways as Arthur was escorted out. In the parking lot, he leaned against his car and threw up, the emotional pressure finally overwhelming his defenses. That night, alone in his empty mansion, Arthur sat in Sophia's room, surrounded by her toys and drawings. He picked up the drawing where she had written, "My family," and felt something inside him harden. His children had declared war. Now they would see what a desperate man was capable of when fighting for someone he truly loved. Arthur picked up the phone and called the most expensive and ruthless investigator he knew. If Edward and Marina and Robert wanted to play dirty, he would show them what it meant to face someone with nothing left to lose. The real battle was just beginning. Arthur hired Helena Vance, a forensic investigator known for her tenacity and relentless methods. In just 48 hours, she had uncovered what Arthur suspected, an elaborate network of corruption and manipulation orchestrated by his own children. "Arthur," Helena said, spreading documents across his study table, "your children didn't just bribe social workers. They bought fake medical reports, paid for testimony from non-existent neighbors, and even infiltrated people into the shelter to traumatize Sophia." Arthur felt nauseous. "Traumatize? What do you mean?" "They hired one of the most aggressive girls in the shelter to intimidate Sophia. They wanted her to develop a fear of institutional places, so she would voluntarily prefer to go with a foster family." "What foster family?" Helena smiled coldly. "A ghost family, fake documents, fabricated references. The plan was to make Sophia disappear into the system, where she could never be found again." Arthur clenched his fists. "My own children planned to erase a child from existence. There's more. I discovered they've been intercepting your donations to charities for years. The money was funneled into shell accounts they control. We have evidence of tax fraud, embezzlement, and now conspiracy against a minor." Arthur looked out the window, at the park where he met Sophia. "Helena, I want you to destroy them. Legally, but completely. I'm already on it. But Arthur, there's something else you need to know." Helena hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Your children hired dangerous people. I found out they paid for Sophia to have accidents at the shelter. Nothing fatal, but enough to justify psychiatric institutionalization for trauma." Arthur felt the world spin. They wanted to have Sophia committed to a private clinic where she would be held indefinitely under heavy medication. Officially for severe trauma and attachment disorder. In practice, it would have been a prison. The final revelation broke something fundamental inside Arthur. He had raised 3 monsters capable of torturing an innocent child to protect an inheritance they didn't even need. What can we do? We have enough evidence for criminal charges. But Arthur, we need to act fast. Sophia is scheduled to be transferred to the foster family tomorrow. Arthur shot to his feet. Tomorrow? They moved up the timeline. They probably realized we were investigating. Arthur immediately called his lawyer, Alan Ramsey. "Alan, I need an emergency injunction. Now." "Arthur, it's 9 o'clock at night." "I don't care. Sophia will disappear tomorrow if we don't act." 3 hours later, Arthur was in court with an emergency judicial order. The judge, initially skeptical, was visibly shocked as he reviewed the evidence Helena had presented. "Mr. Ashworth, these are extremely serious allegations against your own children. Your Honor, I have documented evidence for every claim." The judge examined photographs, bank records, audio recordings, and forensic reports. His expression grew darker with every page. "This is one of the most elaborate and cruel conspiracies involving a minor I have ever seen. Injunction granted. The child is to be immediately returned to the petitioner's custody, and the accused are to be detained for investigation." The next morning, Arthur arrived at the shelter accompanied by court marshals and Helena. The look of panic on the director's face confirmed their plan had been discovered. "Where is Sophia Peterson?" Helena asked coldly. She's already been transferred." "Transferred where?" Tense silence. Helena showed her the court order. "Ma'am, you are obstructing justice. Where is the child?" 20 minutes later, Arthur was in a van, driving to an address in the suburbs. His heart was pounding. What if they were too late? The foster family was actually an illegal holding house, run by a couple paid to keep inconvenient children hidden from the system. When the marshals raided the property, they found Sophia locked in a small, dark room, and clearly drugged with sedatives. "Sophia!" Arthur rushed to her, scooping her into his arms. The girl was semi-conscious, her eyes glazed over, and her movements sluggish. "Mr. Arthur," she murmured, I thought you forgot about me." "Never, sweetheart, never." He carried her out of that house of horrors, tears streaming freely down his face. Sophia had lost weight, had bruises on her arms, and was clearly traumatized. At the hospital, while Sophia received medical care to reverse the effects of the sedatives, Arthur got a call from Helena. "Arthur, we've arrested Edward and Marina. Robert has fled, but we've issued a warrant for his arrest. We found evidence that they planned to make Sophia disappear permanently after a forced psychiatric commitment." Arthur looked through the hospital room window, watching Sophia sleep peacefully for the first time in a week. "Helena, I want you to prosecute them for attempted kidnapping, fraud, corruption, and anything else you can prove." "I'm on it." "Arthur, there are reporters wanting to speak with you. This story is causing a scandal." "I don't care about a scandal. I just want Sophia safe." When Sophia finally woke up, free of the sedatives, she looked at Arthur with eyes that seemed older than her 6 years. "Mr. Arthur, why did your children hate me so much?" Arthur sat beside her bed, choosing his words carefully. "They didn't hate you, Sophia. They were afraid of the love you and I share." "Afraid of love?" "Yes, because real love can't be bought or sold. And that terrified people who only knew relationships based on money." Sophia took Arthur's hand. "Mr. Arthur, I'll never leave you, even if bad people come again." Arthur kissed the girl's forehead, making a silent promise. He would never again let anyone hurt Sophia, not even his own children. The war was over, but the scars would take time to heal. The scandal dominated the headlines for weeks. Millionaire heirs conspire against orphan girl. The family war that shocked the nation. True love versus greed. The Ashworth case. Arthur, who had always shunned publicity, now found himself at the center of a media firestorm. 2 months after Sophia's rescue, the trial of Edward and Marina began. Robert was still a fugitive, reportedly spotted in countries with no extradition treaty. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, and child advocacy activists followed every moment of the proceedings. Arthur arrived at the courthouse holding Sophia's hand, who had insisted on testifying despite her young age. The girl, now looking healthier after months of medical and psychological care, wore a simple blue dress Mrs. Gable had picked out for the occasion. "Mr. Arthur," Sophia whispered as they climbed the courthouse steps, "I'm scared to see them again." Arthur knelt to her level. "Sophia, you are the bravest person I know. You spent your last coins to make me happy. You stood up to bad people who tried to hurt you. You can do anything." Edward and Marina were led in, wearing handcuffs. Marina avoided all eye contact. But Edward looked directly at Arthur with a mixture of hatred and despair that made Sophia hide behind her adoptive father. The district attorney, Charles Mason, presented a devastating case. Bank records showed transfers of millions of dollars from charity funds to the defendants' personal accounts. Audio recordings revealed conversations where they planned to neutralize Sophia permanently. Witnesses confirmed bribes paid to shelter staff and officials. "Your Honor, Mr. Mason said during his opening statement, "This is not just a case of financial fraud. It is the story of how greed can corrupt the most basic family bonds, leading people to torture an innocent child." The defense attorney tried to argue that Edward and Marina had acted out of genuine concern for Arthur's mental health. But the evidence was too overwhelming to allow for any reasonable doubt. The most dramatic moment came when Sophia was called to testify. The judge created a special environment for her, a small chair, a doll to hug, and permission for Arthur to stay close by. "Sophia," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell me what happened when you left Mr. Ashworth's house?" Sophia spoke in a clear but small voice. "Some men came and said Mr. Arthur was sick. They said it was dangerous for me to be with him. Did you believe them?" "At first, yes. But then I remembered Mr. Arthur's eyes when he looked at me. He never had bad person eyes." Many in the gallery wiped away tears. "Sophia, can you tell me about the place they took you to after that?" The girl took a deep breath. "It was dark and cold. There was a big girl who pulled my hair every night. The grown-ups gave me medicine that made my head fuzzy." Edward tried to stand. "She's making it up." "Silence!" The judge slammed his gavel. "Mr. Ashworth, one more outburst and you will be removed from this courtroom." Sophia continued her testimony with a courage that impressed everyone present. She described the days at the shelter, the constant fear, the nightmares, and always the hope that Arthur would come for her. "Sophia," the prosecutor asked finally, "do you want to keep living with Mr. Ashworth?" The girl's eyes lit up. "Yes, he's my real daddy. Not because we were born in the same family, but because he chose to love me." When it was Arthur's turn to testify, he did something unexpected. Instead of attacking his children directly, he told the story of how Sophia had changed his life. "Your Honor, for 40 years I built a business empire. I accumulated wealth, power, influence, but until I met Sophia, I had never experienced unconditional love." Arthur looked at Edward and Marina. "My biological children saw me as a resource. Sophia saw me as a lonely human being who needed affection." "Mr. Ashworth," the judge asked, "do you forgive your children for what they did?" Arthur was silent for a long moment. "Your Honor, I forgive them for hurting me, but I cannot forgive them for torturing an innocent child. Some things are unforgivable." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witnesses recounted Arthur's exemplary character, the positive transformation in his life after adopting Sophia, and the calculated cruelty of the crimes committed against her. When it came time for the verdicts, Edward and Marina were found guilty of fraud, corruption, conspiracy, and cruelty to a minor. Edward was sentenced to 8 years in prison, Marina 6. After the sentence was read, Edward shouted across the courtroom, "Dad, you destroyed your own family for a stranger." Arthur stood, holding Sophia in his arms. "Edward, you don't understand. I didn't destroy my family. I finally found one." Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Arthur and Sophia. A reporter asked, "Mr. Ashworth, what is your message for other families facing similar conflicts?" Arthur looked at Sophia, who was playing with a small bear he had bought for her. "My message is simple. Family isn't defined by blood, but by love, and true love always recognizes true love." Sophia tugged on Arthur's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go home now? I want to show Mrs. Gable my new drawing." Arthur smiled, for the first time in months feeling true peace. Of course, sweetheart. Let's go home. As they walked toward the car, Sophia asked, "Daddy, are you sad about your other children?" Arthur thought carefully about his answer. "I'm sad for what they became, Sophia, but I'm not sad about the family we found." The girl nodded with the peculiar wisdom of children. "Sometimes God lets you lose bad people so you can find good ones." Arthur hugged Sophia tighter, knowing that this 6-year-old child had perfectly summarized the most important lesson of his life. 6 months after the trial, Arthur faced the most important decision of his life. Sitting in his study on a rainy November afternoon, he contemplated 2 documents that would define his family's future: a new version of his will and the transfer papers for half of his fortune. Sophia was at school, finally living a normal childhood. She had adapted wonderfully to her classes, made friends, and started piano lessons, discovering she had a natural talent for music. But Arthur knew the shadow of Edward, Marina, and Robert still loomed over their lives. Robert had finally been captured in Argentina and extradited to the US. His trial was set to begin in 2 weeks, and Arthur knew it would be another media circus. More importantly, there were rumors that the 3 children were planning a joint appeal, claiming the evidence against them had been fabricated. "They'll never give up," Arthur muttered to himself. Alan Ramsey entered the study, carrying a thick folder. "Arthur, we've reviewed all the documents. If you sign today, half of your fortune, approximately $200 million, will be transferred into a trust fund in Sophia's name. And my biological children? They will receive a symbolic amount, $50,000 each, with a specific clause. If they attempt to contest the will or harm Sophia in any way, they forfeit even that amount." Arthur walked to the window, watching children play in the park where he met Sophia. "Alan, do you think I'm being unfair?" The lawyer hesitated. "Arthur, as your legal counsel, I must say this is a drastic decision. As your friend of 20 years, I must say your children dug their own grave." Just then, Sophia arrived home from school, bursting into the study like a hurricane of energy. Her hair was messy, there was paint on her fingers from art class, and she carried a pink backpack Arthur had bought especially for her. "Daddy, look what I learned today." She sat at the piano in the corner of the study and played a simple but touching melody. Arthur felt tears form in his eyes, not of sadness, but of a pure joy he had never experienced before. "That was beautiful, sweetheart. You're becoming an excellent pianist." Sophia ran to him, jumping onto his lap with the familiarity of a true daughter. "Daddy, my teacher said, if I keep practicing, I can play in the school's Christmas recital." "Of course you can. Daddy will be in the front row cheering you on." Mr. Ramsey watched the interaction with a smile. "Arthur, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you regret any of this?" Arthur looked at Sophia, who was now drawing on a piece of paper, completely absorbed in her art. "I regret not being a better father to Edward, Marina, and Robert. I regret compensating for my emotional absence with money, but I do not regret choosing Sophia. Even knowing you might lose the relationship with your biological children forever." Arthur took a deep breath. "Alan, I had already lost those relationships years ago. I was just pretending they still existed." Sophia looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, what are you guys talking about?" Arthur knelt beside her. "Sophia, remember when we talked about inheritances?" "Yes, you said an inheritance is what we leave for the people we love when we're not here anymore." "Exactly. Today, Daddy has to make an important decision about our inheritance." Sophia frowned with the peculiar seriousness of children. "Is it about your other kids?" Arthur nodded. "In part, yes." "Daddy, can I tell you something I learned in school?" "Of course." "Sweetheart, my teacher said that when you plant a seed, it only grows if the soil is good. If the soil is bad, even the best seeds won't grow." Arthur looked deep into the girl's eyes. "And what do you think about that?" "I think you planted seeds of love in your other children. But the soil in their hearts wasn't good. It's not the seed's fault. The child's simple wisdom struck Arthur like a bolt of clarity. He had spent years blaming himself for what his biological children had become. But Sophia was right. He had planted love, but found barren ground. Sophia, if Daddy decides to leave most of our inheritance to you, do you promise to use that money to help other people? The girl's eyes lit up. Can I help other kids like me? Kids who don't have a family? Yes, sweetheart. You can help many children. Sophia thought for a moment. Then yes, Daddy, I promise. But you're going to stay with me for a long, long time, right? I don't want to talk about inheritances because you're leaving. Arthur hugged her tight. I'm going to stay with you as long as I possibly can, sweetheart. This decision is just to make sure you always have everything you need. 2 hours later, Arthur signed the documents. Alan Ramsey witnessed the signature, making the transfer of $200 million to the trust fund of Sophia Peterson Ashworth official. It's done, the lawyer said. Sophia is now officially one of the wealthiest people in the country. Arthur looked at the girl, who was coloring peacefully, completely oblivious to the magnitude of what had just happened. Alan, do you think I did the right thing? Arthur, you gave a fortune to a child who spent her last coins to make you happy. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. That night, during dinner, Sophia asked a question that surprised Arthur. Daddy, are your other children going to be very mad when they find out about the inheritance? Arthur considered lying, but decided to be honest. Probably, yes, sweetheart. Are they going to try and hurt me again? The question broke Arthur's heart. Sophia, I will always protect you. And now you have the resources to protect yourself too. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Daddy, can I tell you a secret? Of course. I don't care about the money. I only care that you chose me to be your daughter. Arthur felt tears roll down his cheeks. Sophia, you saved me. I was dying of loneliness and you brought me back to life. And you saved me from the street. I guess we saved each other. As he tucked Sophia into bed, Arthur reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He had lost 3 biological children, but gained a daughter of the heart. He had distributed his fortune, but had never felt richer. Good night, princess, he whispered, kissing Sophia's forehead. Good night, Daddy. Thank you for choosing me. Arthur smiled, knowing he had made the most important and correct decision of his life. News of the fortune transfer leaked to the press on a cold Monday in December. The headlines were sensational. Millionaire leaves fortune to street girl. Arthur Ashworth's ultimate revenge. Biological heirs disinherited for adopted child. Arthur was prepared for the media storm, but he didn't expect the speed with which his children would react. The following Tuesday, Edward and Marina, who had obtained parole while awaiting their appeals, appeared at his door. Mrs. Gable opened it with a frightened expression. Mr. Ashworth, they insist on speaking with you. Arthur came down the stairs calmly, finding Edward and Marina in the main living room. Both looked visibly worn. Edward had lost weight. Marina had deep, dark circles, and both carried the unmistakable mark of desperate people. Where is Sophia? Arthur asked immediately. At school, Marina replied. Dad, we need to talk. You can't have done this. Arthur remained standing, refusing to sit. Done what? Secured my daughter's future, Edward exploded. Your daughter, Dad, you've known this child for less than a year. We've been your children for decades. And in decades, how many times did you show me genuine love? Marina tried a more emotional approach. Daddy, we made mistakes, huge mistakes, but we are family, your own flesh and blood. Arthur laughed bitterly. Family? Marina, you tortured a 6-year-old child. You planned to make her disappear forever. What kind of monsters did I raise? Dad, we were desperate, Edward defended himself. You had gone crazy, adopting a stranger. A stranger, Arthur shouted, finally losing his composure. Sophia is Carl Peterson's daughter, a man you destroyed. She's a victim of your own cruelty. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Marina and Edward glanced at each other. Realizing Arthur knew much more than they had imagined, "Dad," Marina said in a trembling voice, "what do you want from us?" Arthur walked to the window, watching children play in the park. "I want you to disappear from our lives, forever." "Our lives?" Edward repeated with disdain. "Dad, you're 71. When you die, that girl will inherit $200 million. Don't you see how absurd that is?" Arthur turned, his eyes glinting with a cold fury. "The absurdity, Edward, is that a 6-year-old child has more character than my 3 adult children combined." Just then, Sophia came home from school, entering through the back door as she always did. She stopped in the hall when she heard raised voices in the living room. "Sophia, go to your room," Arthur said quickly, but Marina stood up. "No, Dad, she should hear this." "Marina," Arthur warned. "Sophia," Marina called. "Come here." "Dear." Sophia entered the room hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with Edward and Marina's presence. She positioned herself next to Arthur, holding his hand. "Sophia," Marina said with a forced smile, "do you know how much money my father gave you?" "Marina, stop it," Arthur ordered. $200 million. "Sophia, do you know how much money that is?" Sophia looked at Arthur, confused. "Is it a lot?" "It's more money than most people see in their entire lives," Marina continued, "and my father gave it all to you, a child he's known for less than a year." Sophia processed the information slowly. "Mr. Arthur, is she telling the truth?" Arthur knelt beside Sophia. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy wanted to make sure you'll always have everything you need." Sophia was quiet for a moment, then looked at Marina and Edward. "Are you mad because Daddy gave me money?" "We're mad," Edward said coldly, "because that money should be ours. We are his legitimate children." Sophia frowned. "But you don't like Daddy?" "What do you mean we don't like him?" Marina asked defensively. "You never visited him. You never called. He was sad and lonely. Children who like their parents don't do that." The simplicity of the child's logic cut deeper than any sophisticated argument. Edward lost his patience. "Sophia, you don't understand. You're a street kid who got lucky. We are his real family." Sophia looked at Edward with a deep sadness in her eyes. "Mr. Edward, real family is who loves you, not who was born in the same house." "You're being manipulated," Marina exploded. "A 6-year-old doesn't talk like that." "Enough!" Arthur stood, placing himself protectively in front of Sophia. "Get out of my house." "Now." Edward took a threatening step forward. "Dad, this isn't over. We will fight this in court. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent." "Do whatever you want," Arthur replied calmly, "but do it far away from us." Marina tried one last gambit. "Dad, what if we offer a deal? We split the inheritance 50-50. 100 million for Sophia, 100 million for the 3 of us." Arthur looked at Sophia, who shook her head no. Daddy," Sophia said quietly, "I don't want their money, I just want you." Arthur smiled, scooping Sophia into his arms. "You heard her. My daughter wants nothing that comes from you." Edward and Marina stormed out of the house, shouting threats and promises of legal battles. But Arthur no longer cared. He had found his true family. That night, at dinner, Sophia asked a thoughtful question. "Daddy, will they be able to take the money from me?" Arthur held the girl's hand. "Sophia, even if they could, would that change anything between us?" Sophia shook her head. "No, I was already rich before the money." "How so?" "I was rich because I had you as my daddy." Tears of pride and love rolled down Arthur's face. He had raised 3 biological children who became monsters driven by greed. But he had found a daughter of the heart who understood that true wealth could not be measured in money. "Sophia," he said, "you are the wisest daughter a father could ever wish for. And you're the best daddy in the world, the only daddy I want." Outside, rain beat against the windows, but inside the house, Arthur and Sophia were building memories that would last forever, memories based on genuine love, not financial interest. The true family they had found was unbreakable. 1 year later, on a sunny morning in May, Arthur woke to the sound of a piano from downstairs. Sophia was playing a melody she had composed herself, a happy, hopeful tune that filled the house with a vibrant energy he had never experienced before. He went downstairs and found his daughter at the piano, dressed in her school uniform, her hair in 2 neat braids Mrs. Gable had lovingly made. At 7, Sophia had grown and blossomed in ways that moved Arthur daily. "Good morning, Princess," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Good morning, Daddy. Did you like my new song? I wrote it thinking about the day we met in the park." Arthur sat beside her on the piano bench. "It's beautiful, Sophia. You're becoming a composer as well as a pianist. My teacher says I have a special talent. And she also said that talents are gifts we should share with the world." Arthur smiled, recognizing his daughter's growing wisdom. "She's right. And speaking of sharing with the world, do you remember what we're doing today?" Sophia's eyes lit up with excitement, opening our foundation, the Sophia Peterson Support Center. That day, Arthur and Sophia would officially open the institution they had planned together, a center that would offer a home, education, medical care, and love to orphaned and abandoned children. Sophia had insisted that part of her inheritance be used immediately to help other children in situations similar to the one she had lived. The center occupied a 5-acre plot in the suburbs, with family-style homes where small groups of children lived with dedicated caregivers. There was a school, a library, sports courts, a music studio, and gardens where children could play and dream of a better future. "Daddy," Sophia said over breakfast, "do you think some of the kids will be scared at first?" Arthur considered the question seriously. "Probably, sweetheart. When someone has been hurt many times, it's hard to trust something good. Like when I thought you might be a bad person at the beginning." "Exactly. But do you know what changed everything?" Sophia smiled. "The birthday cake." "No, Sophia. What changed everything was your generous heart. You chose to trust in love, even when you had every reason to be afraid." During the drive to the opening, Arthur reflected on the changes in his life. The final legal appeals from Edward, Marina, and Robert had been definitively denied. The 3 now lived modest lives. Edward worked as a car salesman, Marina as a receptionist, and Robert, after serving his time, had found a job at a small accounting firm. Ironically, the loss of wealth seemed to have started a maturing process. Edward had sent a letter of apology, not for the money, but for the suffering he had caused Sophia. Marina was in therapy, trying to understand how she had become capable of hurting a child. Robert kept his distance, but the threats and manipulation attempts had stopped. Arthur hadn't responded to the attempts at reconciliation. Perhaps one day he could forgive them completely. But the scar of what they did to Sophia was too deep for a quick healing. The opening ceremony was emotional. Hundreds of people attended, journalists, public officials, families interested in adoption, and most importantly, 20 children who would be the center's first residents. Sophia, wearing a simple white dress, cut the inaugural ribbon with a seriousness that belied her young age. When asked if she wanted to make a speech, she stepped up to the microphone. "My name is Sophia Peterson Ashworth," she began in a clear voice. "A year ago, I lived on the street and had no family. Today, I have the best daddy in the world and a house full of love." The audience listened in respectful silence. This center isn't just a place to live. It's a place where kids like me can find out they deserve to be loved, where they can dream of a beautiful future. Sophia looked at Arthur, who was moved to tears in the front row. "My daddy taught me that family isn't who you're born with, but who you choose to stick with. Here, we're going to build a lot of new families." The applause was long and warm. Arthur went up on stage and hugged Sophia, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." After the ceremony, Arthur and Sophia walked through the center's gardens with the first resident children. A 5-year-old girl named Anna timidly approached Sophia. "Sophia, is it true you used to live on the street like me?" "It's true, Anna. And you know what I found out?" What? That it doesn't matter where we lived before, it matters where we choose to build our home. Arthur watched Sophia talking with the other children, seeing how she naturally took on the role of a big sister. There was a maturity in her gestures, but also a genuine joy that reassured him. She had overcome her trauma and kept her essential innocence. At the end of the afternoon, as they drove home, Sophia asked, "Daddy, are you happy?" Arthur stopped the car in front of the park where they had met. It was exactly 1 year and 1 day after that first encounter. "Sophia, I'll tell you a secret. For 70 years, I thought I knew what happiness was. I thought it was success, money, achievements, and it wasn't. No, happiness is coming home and hearing you play the piano. It's seeing your smile when you wake up in the morning. It's being proud of the extraordinary person you're becoming." Sophia leaned over and kissed Arthur's cheek. "Daddy, can I tell you my secret?" "Of course, princess. I don't remember much about my life before I met you. It's like my real life started on the day I sang Happy Birthday to you." Arthur felt tears of gratitude roll down his face. "Sophia, you saved my life, and you saved mine. We're a rescue team." They laughed together, and Arthur knew he had found what he had unknowingly searched for his entire life: unconditional love, a true family, and genuine purpose. That night, as he tucked Sophia into bed, she asked one last question. "Daddy, do you think we'll be happy forever?" Arthur kissed her forehead. "Sophia, I don't know what the future holds, but I know we'll face it together, and that's all that matters. Good night, Daddy. Thank you for choosing me. Good night, Princess. Thank you for teaching me what true love is." Arthur left the room and went to the hallway window, looking out at the park lit by lampposts. A year ago, he was a wealthy but empty man, alone amidst material abundance. Today, he was a whole person, surrounded by the genuine love of a daughter who had come into his life like a gift from fate. He had lost a fortune and 3 biological children, but had gained something infinitely more valuable: a family built on the choice to love, not the obligation of blood. The park, once a symbol of his loneliness, now represented the place where his real life had begun, where a 6-year-old girl had shown that the purest love comes from the most unlikely of hearts. Arthur smiled, knowing he had learned life's most important lesson. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters, and what truly matters cannot be bought, sold, or inherited, only offered freely by those brave enough to love without condition. The true legacy Arthur would leave the world was not in money, but in the example that it's never too late to start over, never too late to choose love, and never too late to find the family your heart has always been searching for.